It's Orktober. I make a lot of orc stuff and most of it is pretty neat, but why and how? Panels. Panels are the foundation. You have seen the panels and they pretty much all start out the same way. As something like this keyboard, which randomly decided to stop working completely out of the blue one day after I spilled coffee on it. Flip it over and take out apparently quite a few screws. I really just want this back slab of plastic, but oh, look at these little key squidgies. They've got some nice detail, but they're too soft to really use on a model. I'll just gather them up in an old peanut butter lid and set them aside. Same with the screws. To make panels, I like to use these big snips to quickly break down the plastic into more manageable chunks. It's actually kind of brittle. Sure, that's free texture, but it'll make it harder to work with. I think white or gray printer plastic is really the best for this, but I'm already committed. With the panel trimmed to size, I begin to add damage and weathering along the sides using various methods. First, with a hobby knife, I shave a long, shallow slice, then go back and cut some deeper notches within the first mark. I also use this small round file as another way to get some edge notches, and a ton of delightful microplastics all over my skin. One sec. Okay, got my craftsman hands, let's continue. Clippers can be used to ding up the edges or create some deeper gouges. The rasp is another great way to do some rough edging. Use some pliers to hold the piece so you don't rasp your hands. Speaking of pliers, we can add some interesting texture into the surface of the panel by squeezing quite hard and leaving an impression of the plier tread. Vice grips have an even cooler diamond-shaped tread mark that we can stamp in. I also like to use small, shallow drill marks as bullet impacts or rusted pits. You can chip and dent the surface with a hobby knife too. Always mix and match these techniques to get some nicely varied surface texture. A hobby saw can be used to simulate torch cut lines. Just make many parallel slices. Once I have a nice selection of panels, I gather them up in an old peanut butter lid and set them aside. It is possible to make panels using this crafting foam. It's nice and flexible and pretty easy to stamp in some surface texture, like with the rasp or this huge nut. Super easy to chop up into panel shapes, but unfortunately the edge can't really take or hold the same level of detail as plastic. That being said, it's useful as a filler or a background panel. Once you have your panels, you need some other bits to make convincing Ork Tek. I'm just taking the bottom of the barrel here to show you that there really are limitless options. Printer ink box, floss container, brittle and shattered water gun chunks, dog bag rolls, and various lids. And what is not at all the bottom of the barrel is the bit, or should I say, the bits. Leave a comment with your favorite bit variation. We got the classic, the scalloped, the fancy, and the inverse. All the goodness of the bit, now inside out. This is what true power feels like. And we got this soap pump lid, and this other heap of stuff, fake Lego and smaller junk for greebles. For piping, I love a classic garden wire. It's just so flexible. Literally. I'll assemble a bunch of bits and panels here for you now. Just grab an old peanut butter lid as a base, and let's figure out how everything is gonna go in. Water gun plus the bit will make an interesting machine chunk. Toss in some hot glue and adjust the height with some dog rolls. To enhance the plastic on plastic bond, I use my new product, SB Grit. Sprinkle that in and saturate with super glue. That ain't going nowhere. Another water gun chunk which has mold lines so you can pretend it's a real model kit. This keyboard foot as a hinged thing, and then I try to place this next piece coming out at an odd angle. My philosophy for building convincing Ork Tek is deliberate yet reserved wonk. So reserved that I even use this pair of Mega Bloks wedges as a mostly parallel set of supports. Okay, next chunk we'll use this floss container. Let's fill in the opening with a little pipe detail and then lay it out with this lid and the other half, following the same wonk principle. How about splitting up the scalloped bit into two components? I'll also take the most interesting part of the printer box, and these Mega Bloks axles also split in half. Then slice and internally stack the printer packaging with the other keyboard foot. I like to avoid perfect right angles, so a cardboard foundation will give some slope to this bit. Scalloped bit chunks off-center, and a lid to make kind of a set of three, and then we add in the axle halves as some kind of exposed tech components. And the last bit of water gun. Speaking of whatever I just said, this video is sponsored by me, Scratch Bashing, now accepting commissions. Do you need that epic orc centerpiece? Or maybe you want to flex on your gaming group with a custom SB original. Send me a message and let's make it happen. Link in description. The inverse bit flipped and reversed with the bicycle spoke rattle piece on top, stacked up with the soap pump and this very nice piece that was hidden inside a small lid. This will balance the piece out with a third cylinder. It's all about balance. You know, I hope that your life is balanced, and in any case, I just hope that you know you are enough, just the way you are. And we need to make sure there's enough detail, and we can hide the origin of this water gun bit by covering that embarrassing nozzle. We talked about it earlier, but now it's pipe time. Use the needle nose pliers to add a harsh angle. We want these to look like metal pipes in the end, not floppy tubes. Use a few different sizes, and then make sure to add the banding. Boop! Using soap pump tubes, I cut little donuts and open them up to fit around the pipes. This gives that sweet perpendicular contrast and helps to sell the scale. I use these Mega Bloks wedges as braces or supports and as a contrast to the rough panels that will make up the majority of the surface. Make sure they get some good texture. And here's the fun bit, adding in the panels. I try not to overlap too much. The idea is that the panels are primarily riveted to the underlying structure or welded side by side. That being said, a little overlap never hurt anyone, and we use some bill foam panels in the hard to reach areas. I don't like to leave too many gaps or voids. Subscribe to fill the void. That's looking pretty panely. Now for the rivets, arguably one of the most important design elements. Got these nail art half pearls, which are superior to rhinestones since they actually look like a rivet and not a gem. Use the wax on a stick tool to pick up and place each rivet into a dollop of glue. Remember that foam is bad and flimsy, so I reinforce that with some SB podge. The garden wire is all rubbery and doesn't take primer very well, so I use Tamiya putty to give it a clean, plasticky surface. I also smear some under and around the tube donuts to consolidate the whole pipe surface. Building and treatment are done. Let's prime with some hardware store flat black. Whoosh! If you were me, this is how you would paint orc stuff. Starting with metals, I just take a bunch of random craft metallics and one that comes in a tube and blend that all together. Sometimes metallics have kind of a streaky coverage over black, so I'll add in some white ink. It's titanium, so technically still a metallic. Aggressively yet thinly brush that over everything. I don't really care about covering detail as long as the paint is nice and thin. We don't want to ruin all that texture we made. But if it's just covered, the washes will bring it out later anyway. I dry brush some lighter silver on and even stipple a bit of interesting surface variation, but you can probably skip that unless you're planning on leaving some bare metal. Let's test that detail with a quick dark wash made from ink, medium, and varnish. Slap that all over, and don't be shy with adding extra water from your branded SB mug. Not that you need it, you can use an old peanut butter lid if you want. Whoops, but man, this is messy.
Save us!
Backed by popular demand, the old school mat is here to absorb punishment. Get everything wet and then liberally apply the wash. Not everything is silver, so let's take a bit of gold and copper to pick out the pipes and other interesting components. And make sure you switch out your metallic flake water before moving on to solid colors.
Get the mug!
My SB red is finally going the way of Citadel paint, but we can always make more. Just take every red that you have and some ink for good measure. Actually, the ink looks pretty vibrant, but what happens if we apply it neat? Spoiler, it doesn't look good. So let's just mix everything together and use that. See, it looks bad. As you know, the method dictates that we only paint the middle of each panel, leaving the edges rough and exposed. And this only works for red. This works for blue. Get in there with that richly pigmented craft paint for some lucky death skulls. But hey, this works for yellow too. This can be a tough color to paint. Again, I have a lot of options to choose from. Do not put your brush in your mouth if you use this ink. I like to prime with white and then layer the yellow on that using the method. This is also how we make the foundation for caution stripes. I don't really have great paintbrushes, but you can add a nice rough edge just by dabbing a little stick on there. These methods all work for purple too. Almost forgot about the checker panels, so I need to go back and cover up some red panels with black. I darkened the black paint with ink, which makes it dangerous enough to apply as a caution stripe using this custom brush. For checkers, you can just roughly sketch in the lines. I use white paint thinned with white ink so that I can get a pigment heavy line that's nice and thin. Connect the grid, and remember, you don't have to be perfect. The white paint will be getting chipped and weathered too, so it can look a bit rough. But nothing looks rough enough yet. The modulation/tinting will really make these look lived in. I make a black-brown glaze wash with flow improver and varnish. You take your branded mug, or wet peanut butter lid, and apply nice clean water all over the panels. Then get that glaze on and work it down onto the lower half. Works on blue too, which is lucky for me, and also yellow. I guess this color is pretty universal. With those dry, it's on to oxidization. I make a new batch every time, so the recipe isn't set, but you need a muted brown-orange for rust and a bright, lightly greened teal or aqua for the vertisvert. Apply the rust, but don't do the glaze panel wetting technique. You want the rust to settle into areas more noticeably. Bronze areas get the vertex geese in the same way, and I even apply some to the silverish metals. cheeky, I know, but it's a great contrast for the red, and it does happen in real life.
See?
You can always go back in with the panel color to make the high areas pop. Sometimes I'll re-highlight some of the rivets in silver and even dry brush some bronze colors back over the vertiges where it might have been worn off. Nothing wrong with going back and forth a bit on these stages until you get the result that you want. I'll even add more of the wash on over that new bronze. Whatever works. What are you making or painting for Orktober? Leave a comment and let me know, or just drop that classic green orc heart. Now you have all the tools you need to build and paint your very own Ork Tek. And now I have these 4 Ork Tek chunks? Paperweights? You're right, I don't need these. Why don't you take them? I'll toss a couple auction links below. You want one? Have at it. Here, and I'll sign each one. Good luck. Thanks for watching, and check out the Patreon if you want to support the channel. There's even a free option. Okay, and I'll see you in the next, potentially epic, build video.